Hello and welcome. I'm Karen Kornbluh, Distinguished Fellow at the German Marshall Fund, and we're very excited to be bringing you our latest edition on conversations with transatlantic AI leaders. Today we have a really well-timed conversation with Arthur Mensch. He's the CEO of Mistral AI, based in Paris. Arthur co-founded the artificial intelligence startup in 2023 after working at Google DeepMind. And he made some news this week, announcing a new partnership with Microsoft. We're going to get into that more in the interview. But before we dive in, I want to introduce my partner in crime, Chris Schroeder, who is the chairman of the board of the German Marshall Fund. He's a global tech investor and entrepreneur. Chris, over to you.
Fantastic. Arthur, what an honor to have you on such a busy time. And so thanks very much for joining us overall. I really would love to start with you helping to right set our audience about what's happening in Europe, because needless to say, the US media, when they talk about AI, they talk about it reviving Silicon Valley as the center of tech and innovation, maybe talk a little bit about China. But you've launched this remarkable enterprise in France and Europe. Why Mistral? Why Europe? Why now?
It's a very good question. So we started Mistral in May 2023, so almost 1 year ago, alongside Guillaume and Timothée, who are also French people. And I think the starting point of Mistral was really that Europe had an enormous opportunity to go fast with a very strong team of mostly European people. As it turns out, Paris in particular, but also London, are great talent pools for the technology we're talking about, which is generative AI. And so that creates a lot of opportunity because AI is all about going fast with small teams that are talented and creative. And we did realize that, and that's how we got started.
You have a mission of a great business, obviously, and have attracted some of the greatest investors on earth. But it's wonderful in reading about you that you've got a mission here as well. And as you think about your priority for AI and its impact in society, how do you think about that?
So we at Mistral wants to make AI ubiquitous, so bring it to everyone and bring the knobs and handles to everyone so that they can modify the technology, adapt it to their needs. Since we're talking about a technology that creates content, this has a lot of cultural impact. And as such, we believe that we should make it neutral, we should make it open, we should spread it among the society, among the developers, and give them the tools to modify them to their needs and to deploy them where they want to deploy them. So that's how we got started. And that's the reason why on our journey, we released the two of the best open source models. So Mistral 7B, Mistral ITX 7B. The reason why we did it was to effectively widen the adoption, accelerate developers' work. And we think it goes very well with this, I guess, European localization, since Europe has some slight differences in cultural aspects, and if we want the cultural aspects to be reflected on AI technology, we need to make it open, and that's like Mistral AI motto.
Let me pull on that string a little bit, if I could, Arthur, because a friend of mine said recently, needless to say, open AI is not that open, and there is a whole debate about what does it really mean to be open. And why does it matter? And what is the alternative?
So in our minds, we have released what we call open weight models. So that's model that you can access, that you can modify. So you can basically modify the parameters that of the statistical underlying model in order for the model to select some words instead of others. So that's what we call open, because it's open because you can modify it, and it's open because you can deploy it and use it on any kind of infrastructure without centralized control. And it's open in opposition to closed API, which are really software as a service offers that forces the user to send its data to the provider, and that prevents the user to make arbitrary modifications to the code. So our open models have this propriety that you can modify them and you can deploy them wherever you want.
I have to tell you, I have been over the years involved in watching tech enterprises go to their governments, usually later down the path of the innovation. And it's been extraordinary to me in America and Europe and beyond. The regulatory environments have stepped very quickly into this. And in many cases, the CEOs themselves have sort of stepped in earlier than ever before. I wonder how you think about it. I mean, the EU has really stepped out in this way, and how you think about the risk of potentially suffocating innovation in the name of responsibility or responsible AI, because there are legitimate concerns overall. But do you have a message as you think about talking to regulators about how to have that balance and how best to think about it in Europe and then beyond?
Yeah, so this is a message that we've conveyed several times, but generally speaking, we're all for the product safety. AI is a technology that you typically use to help decisions, and in order to help decisions, you need to verify with evaluations whether the decision you're helping, whether your help is actually useful and relevant or not. And so we're very much in favor of product level safety, so control of, let's say, a medical diagnostic assistant system, control of a vision system that detects detect animals to triage them, for instance. It's important to do that. What we have observed with the EU AI Act in particular is that the focus was set on the underlying technology. So the general purpose models that we're building are by design able to do any kind of application. So we should think about them as the new programming languages. And in that respect, regulating those and asking for a very high compliance level for such a technology, which is neutral by nature because you can build arbitrary systems with it, is very hard for us. Well, it is hard to implement. And in that respect, it creates, like, regulating too fast creates some friction on a technology which is fundamentally neutral. So that's what we've been saying. We have been heard to some extent by the regulation makers. And now what we have with the EU AI Act is a set of documentation constraints that are very much manageable, so that we can work with, that forces some evaluation, which are not completely relevant in the sense that evaluation should be made at the product level, because you can't evaluate a technology that can take any form. But on the other hand, it gives some form of proxymetrics over a certain amount of capacities of the model. And so, I mean, maybe it's better than nothing, but it has not a lot of value. We can handle it. It's basically amounts to hiring a couple of engineers for doing the compliance part. And so it's okay. I won't say it's the best outcome, but I would say it's a very workable way of in which we can operate.
Well, we salute you for your engagement in it, because I think it's important. Other guests have said to us in the series, one of the challenges, I mean, there's a lot of good intent, actually, but sometimes the challenge is that the language of your world and the language of policy and regulation are two separate languages. You have to actually find translation so people really do understand the ramifications. What have you found most successful in that way?
This is effectively a dialogue which is a bit hard to have, because we're dealing with a frontier technology that we're also discovering ourselves, but which is really just generating words. So we are not talking about the technology that is going to escape our control. We're generating words, we're accelerating writing. So in that sense, we are not dealing with something that we can lose control over. And there's a lot of misrepresentation of what the technology is doing and how it should be considered. And I think we've made some progress. Like in the last 6 months, it would be a bit caricatural to say that the regulators are still not understanding what they're talking about, because I think there was some education, and now people understand what can be done from a technological perspective, what is useful, what is less useful. I think we're converging. I believe that the decisions that we're taking for the AI Act in particular were probably written a bit before we started to converge on some technical understanding, but it's still a workable thing. This is still something we can work with.
We talk a lot about, I even started the conversation talking a bit about this. Is it an American leadership? Is it a Western leadership? Is it a Europe separate leadership issue overall? But in reality, obviously, China is playing a big role in this, and there's the rest of the world. And I'm wondering if you are advising entrepreneurs who are not in, America, Europe, and China, and were to say how they should be thinking about what's coming. outside of this? Are they out of the rule of setting the rules of the road and they just have to respond to what's happening, or would you have a different message to them?
No, I think so. At Mistral, we really take a worldwide perspective. We believe that this technology is also going to be a great enabler of non-Western countries. As a developer from these part of the world, I would embrace the technology and start building on top of it. And in particular, realize that we're dealing with something that needs to be that needs to soak with specific cultural values, that needs to embrace rare languages as well. And I would start considering that, like, the technology that foundational model makers like us are building will eventually become so customizable that much more things will be doable with it. And I would start preparing for that. So it means new languages. It means that we'll be able to reason even in rare languages. We find it very unfair that models are very good at English and less good at all of the other languages, and this is something that we're working on. And generally speaking, I believe that this technology is going to spread, which means that as we go forward, it will be easy to pick up a model and to build a great application on top of it, and to create some differentiation that might be regional in particular.
It's such a perfect lead to be thinking about actually what it is that you're offering, because I must say, having seen a lot from the Silicon Valley perspective, what you're doing is kind of blown me away. I mean, overall, I mean, your model is really smaller than GPT-4. It rivals it in performance, probably in every way. This means customers are going to be able to run the models on their computers, use less energy, and have this sort of global expansion on the local terms in a way that's not there. Can you just, at a very basic level, how is this possible? And how much of this is about curation of different data sets? What is the essence of this that you're doing?
Well, I guess it's of a technological essence. So like the ingredient to create great models is our data, our optimization techniques, are also architecture choices. So basically the distribution on which you train on, the technique that you use to minimize a certain function, so to actually fit the distribution. And eventually what matters is also the way you represent the generation of what. So there's these three aspects. And one of the reasons why our models are small yet good is that we have mastered and have had some very creative ideas on the three aspects. So on the architecture side in particular, we were the first actor to use sliding window attention, which is a way of reducing memory footprint. And we were the first to release a strong sparse mixture of expert model that would actually work with and be useful. And so all of these things, innovating on the architecture side, but also innovating on the way we curate data sets and innovating on the way we optimize models, are things that creates like the beginning of our IP, let's say.
I mean, a couple of weeks ago, everyone thought that Microsoft had made a bet fundamentally on OpenAI to do something in a different approach. And you made big news this week. Can you tell us a little bit about what just happened and why?
Yes. So as a model provider, we do need to provide our model and to deploy our model where our customers are. And oftentimes these customers are actually working on the cloud. So we work with enterprises and they already have located their IT and their entire infrastructure with cloud providers. And so that means that for us to create a portable solution, so to expose our model where the developers are working, that means that it's very favorable to make some agreement with cloud providers. And the first agreement we made was with Microsoft. And the content of this agreement is that our models are going to be available within Azure space. So that means that as an Azure customer, you can, in a few clicks, access our model in a secure network, in an Azure secure network, using your Azure credits. And that's a great accelerator of our growth.
Which is a major event, so congratulations to you. And one of the things tying up much of this great conversation together is that I think sometimes that people in the world, they're still trying to figure out, the famous saying that technological revolutions are overestimated in the short run and underestimated in the long run. I think people are trying to have a vision of what this is going to look like in sort of the medium term overall. And I'm wondering what I just had a conversation with some VCs who were talking about most applications around AI today are just sort of adding greater efficiency to that which has already come. And yet we know we're about to open up in a whole new world. I wonder if you could just share what applications you're going to be most excited about overall, and what it's going to take to make that real.
So what I'm most excited about is to see these reasoning models become faster and faster. Because right now, if you look at even our best model, Mistral Large, it's still a little slow when it comes to exposing the way it reasons. And as we go faster and faster, as we grow models that are smaller, as we move to more specialized hardware, what it means is that as a developer, your API call, which is currently quite costly in terms of time and also in terms of dollar, is going to it's going to be faster and it's going to be cheaper. And so that means you're going to be, as an application maker, able to make more of it. So this high reasoning call that you are making once on your application, you'll be able to make it 1,000 times. And what that means is that you're now able to explore, you're able to reflect on what you've said before, you're able to call tools, to reason about the output of the tools. And so we're entering a world where applications will be able to make thousands of calls to large language models and to reasoning capacities. And what that means is that we'll have applications that enable to do anything with language interaction. And that's, I think, for me, the most exciting part. It's an horizontal way of thinking about things. But if you look at all of the applications we can make, the most exciting example for me are in healthcare, I would say. That if you have a model which is connected to an hospital system and connected to a database of cases, you're able to give some advice on medical diagnosis when they're urgent to make, and this is going to save lives. So that's just one example that requires to have a lot of LLM calls if you want to have something that works reliably. But this is going to be enabled with the efficiency work that we're doing, with the efficiency work that other hardware providers are doing. And eventually we'll move into a world where programming is all about orchestrating thousands of LLM calls that are going to be low latency and low cost.
One of the things I find is great entrepreneurs always know great entrepreneurs. You gave a great example in healthcare. Do you have another example of something you're actually seeing in process now that really is game changing that you're as equally excited about?
So I would say hardware. Yeah, I mentioned faster hardware is a game changer. And then if I look at, I think something quite exciting as well is the fact that we are going to be able to leverage and do some BI in a much faster way than what we used to do. So instead of writing SQL queries, where you just ask your data lake to provide an answer. And in that respect, there's a lot of companies that are thinking about data and AI together to come up with better insights, to come up with basically better applications that are better data informed. And I think this is downstream of what we're building, but this is also as exciting as what is upstream, which is hardware, faster hardware.
Give me one example my father could understand in this, because I think this is real life stuff. I mean, the infrastructure is central, but this is going to change people's lives in real ways that I think is often underestimated in the policy discussion.
So a very good example is probably in education. In education, if you want to be efficient with a student, you need to identify what are his strengths and what are his weaknesses. And identifying the strengths and weaknesses of 30 students when you're a teacher is a bit hard. On the other hand, if you start and acquire some data about how the student is performing on various exercises, so asking him to write out or asking him to just draw things, and then you ask, basically we can envision some applications where the teacher is leveraging all of these inputs and leveraging some reasoning AI capacities to identify very precisely what kind of exercises should be given to a certain student. And that way, you're somehow duplicating what a single teacher can do, because it's going to be able to individualize the way he's pouring the knowledge into students in that sense. And so this form of giving an enormous leverage to workers based on data and AI is replicable everywhere, but education is probably one of the most exciting vertical and the easiest to understand.
The idea that my kids, who are very, very different, each of them could have their own tutor on their terms and their language, to me is a mind blow.
Exactly. So it's their own tutor it's like they will have their own tutor, but when it becomes very powerful is that if you have a real tutor, a real human who is behind all of this, who is looking at the input that the AI is providing him or her, and so that he or she behaves exactly as they should when talking to the students. Because education requires some human contact, and this is not going to change. But if you can individualize this content more, we're gaining a lot of efficiency in terms of tuition.
People are afraid that this is a replacement, massive replacement phenomenon. And you've used repeatedly sort of the co-pilotness of this technology with human beings. And that seems very powerful. How do you think about that over time?
I think this is going to evolve. Something, as I've said, which is not going to change, that humans are rewarded by having human contact. So at the end of the day, every work is all about interacting with your colleagues and communicating. And so I think this is going to stay. Like, there's no world in which AI starts doing business together. There's no world in which teachers disappear. There's no world in which lawyers disappear. On the other hand, I would say everybody needs to start learning about how to use AI, just like they started to learn how to use the internet 30 years ago. Because it creates a lot of leverage. It gives easier access to knowledge, and it's really something that everybody should master, because otherwise inequality will widen. And so there's a strong role in that respect of the policymakers to think about how to have some program for training people. So both on the youth side, how do you train new people to work with AI, but also on the older side. So how do you retrain people to work better with AI? And so this is going to be quite important in order to have AI reduce inequality instead of widening them. And I'm a very strong believer that this is not going to happen without an intervention of the state.
Well, I think replacing lawyers, you just scared the hell out of half of our audience, but I think it's good to have some competitive pressure on them. I want to be sensitive to your time. And so two more just sort of flying the plane up questions, if I could, is I just spent a month in Europe, primarily with the tech entrepreneurs. I just can't get over the talent that is there. I can't get over the innovation that is there in many ways. And yet, to a person, woman and man, they really felt like they were running with ankle weights. There's a lot of encumbrance in Europe upon them. How do you think about how Europe can do more to unleash this level of talent and capacity who really want to make change?
There's several aspects to it. So the European market adoption of AI is slightly less mature than in the US. This has always been the case, but it's a matter of 9 to 12 months. So this is evolving fast. It's also structured in a way that is more long tail and more mid-market. So you have more companies, but that are smaller. So obviously that creates a different structure when you're a B2B business. But that's manageable. A lot of European companies have done it. I would say on the financial perspective and on the funding perspective, we've observed that early stage venture capitalists are very well structured in Europe today. And it took some time, but now it's very satisfying. When it comes to growth, it's still a little in the making. So there's probably some improvement that will be done in the coming years in that respect. And generally speaking, the market is structured differently, but that's addressable. The talent density is very high, and that also makes up a lot for the several small difficulties that we may encounter in Europe.
If I've seen anything around the world, is a success breeds success, and people like you become a North Star, Arthur. And I know it's additional pressure on you, but there are a lot of young people who are watching this as a model that what France and Europe could become. And so we're very excited for you. And we wrap up every one of these discussions by asking the same question to our very generous guests overall. And it's just, what are you reading? What are you listening to? If you were to tell this audience a couple of things they ought to be reading now, or the podcasts they follow, or whatever you defined it, what would you tell them?
So I started to read nonfiction this year because I had to learn a few things. Right now, I've been reading the book of Claire Johnson called Scaling People, because we are scaling people. And so we have 40 people now, and obviously some, I guess, HR structuration to start doing. So that's what I'm reading. And on the fiction side, I'm reading Romain Gary, who is a great French writer at the moment. And
brilliant writer.
everybody reads his book.
Anything on AI that you found useful, or there's a particular place that you gravitate to or would have people
On
gravitate
AI,
to?
well, I read papers. That's what people should be reading generally. Yeah. Science papers. That's where the knowledge is, and that's where the knowledge will likely remain.
We'll be sharing links. We may follow up with you for a couple that we could particularly focus the audience on.
I'll just send you a couple of interesting new things.
Arthur, there really is no gift a person can give than their time and their insight, and you could not possibly be busier. And so we at GMF are extremely grateful that you do this with us, and we look forward to not only watching your journey, but hopefully being a friend to it. So thank you.
Thank you.